Hello, this is Jean Marie Ward for Buzzy Magazine. With me today is Rick Gualtieri, the best-selling author of the Tome of Bill series. Welcome, Rick.
Thank you so much.
We're thrilled to have you. The Tome of Bill, your 11 and counting book series about Bill the Vampire and his world, is usually described as horror comedy or comic horror. What is comic horror, and what attracted you to it?
Horror comedy is taking the roller coaster that is horror and breaking up those periods of tension with purposeful laughter. A lot of classic horror movies have, I don't know if they're intentional or not, but they have like periods of levity, and it's meant to, I guess, foster that roller coaster. Well, horror comedy is similar to that, except it puts more emphasis on that roller coaster, where it wants you to laugh, then scream, then laugh again, then scream some more, and kind of like hit you from both sides. So at any given time, you might be looking at something being terrified, and then a few minutes later you're just laughing your head off. And I just love that because it just runs that gamut of emotions. I'm a big fan of Halloween, so I love the concept of horror movies, Halloween, that concept of a safe scare where it gets the adrenaline pumping, but at the same time you're kind of safe. It's not like a real scare really. But then a few minutes later you might just be laughing, and it's just, I don't know, maybe it's an endorphin thing or so, but it's a real, I just always find them to be a great mix. It's like peanut butter and chocolate there with regards to entertainment.
How did Bill enter your writing life? What was the inspiration behind him? Did he arrive fully formed, complete with snarky dialogue? Or did it take some time to figure out his secrets?
Well, I'm still trying to figure out Bill's secrets. As he grows as a character, I'm now in the sequel series, which is called Bill of the Dead. We're still learning more about him, a little more about his life. He's a little older, a little wiser. Maybe not all that much wiser.
Wouldn't want him to change his character.
And a lot of people will ask, well, when's he going to grow up? I'm like, it's a horror comedy series, emphasis on the comedy. He's not ever going to grow up all that much. But Bill started out really as just a thought exercise. I'm a gamer in real life, and I have an awesome gaming group I play with on a bi-weekly basis. Very snarky. Just rude. We have a lot of fun together. And the idea behind Bill the Vampire really just started out as me thinking, well, what would happen if all of us were actually stuck in a real scenario, inside the game? And then I played around with my head, and I was like, well, instead of in the D&D game, what if we were confronted with a horror scenario? Because I grew up on horror movies like the Hammer films and such. And Bill just kind of sprung from there. I can't say he's any one person, but between him and his friends, they're kind of an amalgam of a lot of the folks I've gamed with over the years. And from there, deciding that on his personality, which really is, he's a nice guy, but he's also a bit of a jerk. That really wasn't that hard to come up with. And that also plays into the horror comedy aspect, because him being a bit of a jerk means that a lot of times when he's getting the crap kicked out of him by something, he kind of deserves it.
That always helps. So I was going to ask about, how have your experiences as a gamer influenced the character? You've already taken care of that, but there's an aspect of your experience that we haven't covered yet, and that is your podcasting experience. And has that played into Bill, or has it played into some of your other writing?
I'm not sure. I think the podcasting experience is secondary to the fact that I podcast with a group of 5 just awesomely talented writers. And just seeing the things they come up with both in the game, on the podcast, and also having read most of their stuff, it inspires me to do better. Mm-hmm. So sometimes I'll read something, that Drew Hayes or John Hartness or Robert Bevan wrote, and I'll just look at that and be like, why am I not that good? But instead of that being a jealousy thing, it's more like, okay, no, now I need to be that good, or I need to push myself harder. So it's really just more of an inspiration thing. The podcast itself, I'll be perfectly honest, is more or less just pure fun.
That's Authors and Dragons?
Authors and Dragons, yes.
And I do believe that Authors and Dragons have a sideline collaborating on a monthly horror comedy series called Shingles. It sounds contagious and rude. Could you tell us more?
A lot of us, growing up, we grew up with the Goosebumps books. And I believe it was Robert Bevan, he was the one who put forth this idea. Well, what if the people who read those books also grew up? But they kind of like, they want that same kind of like, that same kind of short story. But these people are older. They might be a little cruder. They can handle more adult. They can handle more adult humor. So we really just kind of took that concept and said, all right, let's create these just messed up horror comedy stories that really, we just don't put any boundaries on ourselves. In a way, you could call it speculative fiction, but it's just like probably any person who writes speculative fiction would be horrified if we called it that.
Unless they had a sense of humor.
Yes. I mean, Shingles is great because it allows us to really just run with any idea, no matter how horrific, and just run with it for about 100 pages and see where we can take it. And it's been a lot of fun.
Oh, cool.
I think a lot of stories that just would never have seen the light of day, and we're up to about the 21st one is releasing actually this September. Mm-hmm. So I think that's about 21 stories that really wouldn't have seen the light of day otherwise.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And your worlds are expanding in other directions too. I mean, getting back to Bill, you are expanding his world by including stories from other writers. Could you talk a little bit about that too?
A couple months back, we released the first of what I'm calling the Tome of Bill universe. Mm-hmm. Kind of, I guess, stealing phrase from the Star Wars expanded universe. Yes. And I released a co-authored book with Ari Carr. Mm-hmm. She's an extraordinarily talented writer. And, I had put forth this idea on my Facebook page about the concept of maybe expanding Bill's world, and she approached me and she said, hey, I have this idea for this new character, and her story kind of intersects with Bill's world, and I really liked it. Mm-hmm. So we worked together on it, back and forth a lot. We worked really well together. It came out. It's out in audio. It just recently came out in audio. Mm-hmm. Really narrated by award-winning narrator Andrea Ems, and she did an awesome job. And we're expanding that to a second book and probably a third book after that. And I'm talking to a few other authors to try to expand that. My goal is quantity over quality. So
quantity over quality.
Yeah, I knew I was going to screw that up. Quality over quantity. So I don't want to release these fast. I want to release these good. I want every book there to stand out. It might be different from what you expect if you read Bill the Vampire, but I want each one for you to walk away and be like, damn, that's a good story. Mm-hmm. And that's my goal is, I'm not just reaching out to to anybody who can pick up a pen. I'm reaching out to people who who I have respect for in the industry.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. And we've just got a couple more questions, but I can't let you go without asking this one. You also write erotic paranormal stories. How did you get started writing in a genre usually associated with women?
Well, technically speaking, Cara Vance writes in that.
And Cara Vance has never been photographed in the same room at the same time with you.
One might argue Cara Vance has never been photographed, period. It started out as a writing challenge. Mm-hmm. On one of the many author forums, somebody had put out and said, the best way to grow as a writer is to pick something you're uncomfortable with and make yourself comfortable with it. And the concept of erotic romance, and I'll preface this by saying, Cara Vance's stories really are not romance.
I know they are, and I've read one.
My favorite one amongst them is one called The Necromancer's Wife, mm-hmm. and it's a brutal story, but I love the story because it is just. My favorite interview, my favorite review of it was somebody saying, "This really isn't romance. These are two deplorable people who just happen to have a lot of sex." And I was like, you're probably right.
Yes, but it is a good comeuppance story.
Yes. Yes, unfortunately, it's hard to sell. I don't think there's a revenge romance category out there, but I'm really proud of that story, and it came about really just by me saying, okay, I want to grow as a writer. Let me pick a genre I'm not comfortable in, and do my damnedest with it. Mm-hmm. And at this point, haven't put out a lot of Caravans books, but I'm a lot more comfortable with it, and. It worked. In fact, I would recommend for any author out there, a great growth strategy is pick a story that you look at and say, I can never do that. I'm not comfortable with that, and take a stab at it. Mm-hmm. The worst case scenario is you put it away in a drawer, but best case is you walk away and realize, okay, I surprised myself. Now I am comfortable with it.
Great. Well, we've touched on a lot of areas of your writing life, and we really are coming up to the end of the interview. But we have to ask you, what are you working on now?
This is a good time to ask, because one of my goals before coming to Dragon Con was I had 2 stories in the works, and I wanted to put the end to both those first drafts, and I did it Friday, quite literally 3 days ago and 2 days ago.
Cool.
So those stories are Everyday Horrors, which is Bill of the Dead Book 2, which I said is the sequel series to Tome of Bill. And the other is called Bent on Destruction, and that's Book 3 in a series called The Hybrid of High Moon. Mm-hmm. So that's whereas Bill the Vampire was me tackling vampires, in that series is me mostly tackling werewolves. Mm-hmm.
Is that written under R. Gualtieri or under Rick?
That's under Rick Gualtieri.
Okay.
And I differentiate between those two. So I have Caravans. She's off doing her thing. Rick Gualtieri means, if you see Rick Gualtieri on the cover, it means there's probably a heavy comedic hint to it. If you see R. Gualtieri, it means it's probably a more serious story. So that's kind of just me differentiating my brand a little bit.
Yes, yes. Okay. Is there anything you'd like to add before we close?
Well, I want to thank you so much for speaking to me. I think that every step I've taken since starting on this journey has just been incredible. I'll be perfectly honest. I wrote Bill the Vampire as a bucket list item, just to say, hey, I wrote a novel. I put it out there. I expected most people to say this sucks, and if so, I would have been like, hey, that's fine. Let me go back to what I'm doing. Instead, I've turned it into a career, and honestly, it really doesn't get any better than that.
And that's a wonderful place to end this interview. Thank you, Rick, and thank you for Buzzy Magazine.